One phone call at 2 a.m. changed everything. My little boy lay in a hospital bed fighting for his life. My parents refused to help. In that moment, 12 years of quiet sacrifice ended. This is how a father learned to say no, to save the person he loved most. It was 2:17 a.m. when the phone rang. The sound sliced through the dark like a knife. I jolted awake, heart hammering before my eyes even opened. The glowing numbers on the screen lit up the bedroom in cold blue light. Kairos? Dr. Nadia Patel's voice was steady, but I heard the urgency beneath it. Orion has been in a serious car accident. He's at Portland Children's Hospital. There's swelling on his brain. We need to operate within the next few hours. You need to come now. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I don't remember pulling on clothes. I don't remember the keys in my hand. All I remember is driving through sheets of rain, wipers slashing furiously across the windshield, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every second stretched too thin. When I burst through the emergency room doors, the smell of antiseptic hit me like a wave. Orion lay on the narrow bed, tiny under the harsh lights. Tubes ran across his chest. Monitors beeped in a chaotic rhythm. A dark bruise was already spreading across his forehead like spilled ink. His eyes fluttered open when he heard my footsteps. "Daddy." His voice was barely a whisper. I crossed the room in 2 strides and took his hand. It was so small, so cold against my palm. I held it tightly, as if I could transfer every ounce of my strength into him. "I'm here, buddy. Daddy's right here. You're going to be okay." The nurses moved around us with quiet efficiency. They spoke in low voices about pressure, scans, and surgical consent. I signed papers with shaking fingers while my mind screamed one single thought: I can't lose him. In the brief quiet before they wheeled him away, desperation took over. I stepped into the hallway, rain still dripping from my jacket onto the linoleum floor, and dialed the only people I thought I could count on. My father answered on the 3rd ring, his voice groggy. "Kairos? It's the middle of the night. What's going on?" "Dad, it's Orion. He was in a bad accident. They're rushing him into emergency brain surgery. I need help. I need time away from work and the initial costs before insurance clears. I'm asking for support, just this once." There was a pause. Then I heard my mother's voice join the line, soft but already guarded. "Kairos, sweetheart, we're so sorry to hear this, but we can't. Selene is launching her 3rd wellness studio next month. We've already promised to cover the build-out costs and the launch event. All our resources are committed there. We have to think about what's sustainable for the whole family." I stood frozen in that sterile hallway, phone pressed hard against my ear. "You're telling me no?" My voice came out hoarse, almost disbelieving. "For your own grandson?" "Your sister has worked incredibly hard on this," my father replied, his tone firm and final. "This studio is her future. We need to prioritize her right now. She needs our full focus." The words landed like stones in still water. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply ended the call and let my arm fall to my side. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the floor. I slid down the cold wall until I was sitting on the damp tiles, staring at nothing. 12 years. For 12 years I had given everything to them without question. Every late night, every weekend, every creative idea I poured into Selene's studios. I had done it quietly, believing that was what a son was supposed to do. I had become the invisible support holding everything together. And tonight, when my son's life hung in the balance, the answer was the same one I had always received in different forms. Selene needs it more. Through the glass window, I watched them wheel Orion toward the operating room. His small hand slipped from under the sheet for a brief moment before disappearing behind the double doors. Something deep inside me cracked open, not with rage, not with shouting. It was quieter, deeper, It was the sound of a fracture finally showing after carrying too much weight for far too long. This is the story of a father who stayed silent for 12 years, and the single night he realized he could no longer afford to be the invisible support for everyone else. Because the most powerful boundaries we ever set aren't born from anger. They're born from love. The days after the surgery blurred into a quiet kind of hell. I barely left Orion's bedside. The hospital room was small, filled with the constant hum of monitors and the faint smell of antiseptic. Sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds during the day, while at night the hallway lights cast long, pale shadows across the floor. Orion would wake up crying sometimes, his small body trembling from pain and the strange new fear that lived inside him now. He'd reach for my hand and whisper, "Daddy, is my head going to be okay?" Each time something inside my chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. I sat there for hours holding his hand, watching him drift in and out of sleep. And in those long, heavy silences, the memories began to surface. 12 years. For 12 years I had poured myself into Selene's dreams. I designed her first studio when she had almost nothing, turning an old warehouse into a sanctuary of soft light and calm lines. I worked through weekends, skipped my own projects, and never once sent her an invoice. Every new location that followed, I did the same. I gave my time, my talent, my reputation, all of it, quietly. And every time, my parents would smile and say the same thing. "Selene is such a visionary. She's a genius at business." I never asked for credit. I told myself that was what family did, that being the steady one was my role. Now, as I watched my son fight to recover, that old story began to crack. Jordan Reed came by on the third day. My business partner and closest friend stood in the doorway for a moment, raincoat still dripping, before pulling up a chair beside me. "You look like hell, Kairos," he said gently. "You can't keep doing this alone." I didn't answer right away. My eyes stayed on Orion's sleeping face. Jordan leaned forward, voice low. "You've carried them for years. Every studio Selene owns has your soul in it. But right now, your son needs you whole. You can't keep being the wall that holds everyone else up while your own house falls down." His words landed softly, but they stayed with me long after he left. Later that evening, Evelyn Hart stopped by. She was my old mentor, a woman in her late 60s whose healing center I had designed years ago when no one else believed in her vision. She brought a small bouquet of white flowers and placed them on the windowsill. "You saved my dream once," she said, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Now it's time to save your own. You can't keep sacrificing your child's peace for other people's success. That's not love, Kairos. That's slow erosion." I swallowed hard. Her kindness hurt more than anger ever could. The next morning, Theo Lang, my young assistant, came to drop off some design files. He stood awkwardly by the door at first, unsure whether to speak. Then he glanced at Orion and said quietly, "Boss, one of our old clients called yesterday. She said the meditation room you designed for her last year, it's the only place she feels safe when her anxiety gets bad. She told me it literally saved her. She wanted to thank you again." He smiled, innocent and proud. I nodded, but inside, something shifted. All those years I had built beautiful spaces for strangers and for my sister, spaces that helped people heal, breathe, feel grounded. Yet when my own son needed me most, I was still being asked to put someone else's future first. The injustice didn't explode. It didn't scream. It settled in slowly, like cold water rising. A quiet, burning anger began to grow beneath the exhaustion. Not the loud kind that breaks things, the silent kind that clarifies everything. I started to see it clearly for the first time, how I had become the invisible wall, the one everyone leaned on, the one no one ever thought might crumble. As Orion stirred again, murmuring in his sleep, I brushed the hair from his forehead and made a promise I hadn't yet spoken out loud. This couldn't continue. Not anymore. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet. But for the first time in 12 years, I felt the weight of a decision forming inside me. Heavy, inevitable, and long overdue. The decision didn't come in a single dramatic moment. It arrived quietly in the middle of another sleepless night beside Orion's hospital bed. As I watched my son's chest rise and fall under the thin blanket, something inside me finally settled into place. I was done building other people's dreams while my own child paid the price. The next morning, I made the call. I told Jordan Reed I wanted to create something new, a project called Healing Haven, a place where children fighting serious illness and their families could find peace without worrying about cost. Jordan didn't hesitate. He simply said, "It's about time," and got to work. Dr. Nadia Patel joined us 2 days later. We sat together in my small studio after hours, surrounded by half-finished drawings and fabric samples. Her eyes softened when I explained the vision. Soft lighting that didn't hurt sensitive eyes, quiet corners for parents to cry, spaces designed to feel safe instead of clinical. "This could change lives," she whispered. We turned my own modest studio into the first Healing Haven prototype. I worked late into the nights, redesigning every inch with Orion in mind. Every curve of the walls, every gentle color on the floor, every soft light fixture became an act of love for my son and for every child who would walk through those doors. For the first time in years, I felt purpose flowing through my hands again. Then the phone rang. It was a Thursday afternoon. Orion had just been discharged and was resting at home. I was sketching final adjustments when my mother's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Kairos," Lyra said, her voice bright with expectation. "Your father and I were just talking with Selene. She's found the perfect location for her third studio. It's bigger than the others and she really needs your touch. The timeline is tight, but we know you can make it beautiful." I closed my eyes. The old reflex rose up. The automatic urge to say yes, to fix things, to keep the peace. But this time, it meant something stronger. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I can't take on any more free projects for the family." There was a stunned silence. "What do you mean you can't?" My father's voice cut in, sharp and disbelieving. "This is your sister we're talking about." "I mean exactly what I said," I replied, my tone calm but steady. "From now on, I won't be designing or building any more studios for Selene without compensation, and I won't be able to help with any future family projects for free." Selene's voice suddenly burst onto the line, trembling with disbelief and anger. "You're serious? After everything we've been through? After all the years you've supported me, you're choosing now to turn your back?" I felt the familiar pull, guilt, old loyalty, the fear of being seen as selfish. My hand tightened around the phone. Memories flashed. Late nights at her first studio, my parents praising her vision while I stood quietly in the background. But then I looked across the room at Orion, who was carefully stacking blocks with his still weak hands. He glanced up and gave me a small, tired smile. That smile anchored me. "I'm not turning my back on anyone," I said evenly. "I'm simply choosing to stop being the invisible support that everyone takes for granted. My time and my work have limits now, and those limits start with protecting my son." The reaction was immediate and raw. My mother's voice broke. "Kairos, this isn't like you. You've always been the responsible one, the steady one." "Maybe I have," I answered softly. "But being steady shouldn't mean disappearing." My father's tone turned cold. "You're making a mistake. Family doesn't work this way." "I know," I said. "That's why things have to change." I ended the call without raising my voice. The studio fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear or guilt. It was from clarity. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The old Kairos, the one who always said yes, who carried everyone else's weight, was gone. In his place stood a father who had finally learned that protecting his child wasn't selfish. It was necessary. As I set the phone down and returned to my sketches for Healing Haven, I felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I had spoken my truth. Heavier because I knew this was only the beginning. The storm was coming, and I was no longer willing to stand in the middle of it alone. The afternoon light poured gently through the large windows of Healing Haven. Soft golden beams danced across the pale wooden floors I had chosen myself. Children's laughter echoed softly in the open space, not loud, but alive. A little girl with a bright scarf on her head was drawing at the low table near the window. Another boy, barely walking again after treatment, was carefully stacking soft foam blocks with Orion's help. Orion sat on a cushion, still pale and moving slowly, but he was smiling. A real smile. The first one I had seen since the accident. My chest ached with something close to hope. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the quiet beauty we had created. Parents spoke in hushed, grateful voices. A few of the doctors and nurses who had helped Orion were there too. For the first time in months, the weight on my shoulders felt just a little lighter. Then the door opened. Vance, Lyra, and Selene walked in without invitation. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Conversations faded, heads turned. My father's face was tight with controlled anger. My mother's eyes were red, her usual composure cracking at the edges. Selene stood between them, chin high, but her hands were trembling. "Kairos," my father said, his voice carrying across the room. "We need to talk. Now." I felt every eye in the room shift toward us. Orion looked up, his small smile fading as he sensed the tension. "Not here," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice even. "This is not the place." But Selene stepped forward, her voice rising, sharp and unsteady. "Why not here? So everyone can see what kind of brother you really are. You abandon your own family and then throw this little party for strangers." Her words cut through the gentle atmosphere like broken glass. A few parents pulled their children closer. The soft laughter died completely. "You've always been the responsible one," my mother added, her tone laced with hurt and disappointment. "And now you're choosing to walk away? You're thinking only of yourself while your sister struggles." Selene's eyes filled with tears. She didn't try to hide them. "You're destroying everything I've built," she cried. "All those years you helped me, and now you suddenly decide it means nothing? You're punishing me and my dreams because of one mistake?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I stood still, heart pounding heavily in my chest. Old memories flashed. Late nights spent refining her studio layouts, my parents praising her ambition while I remained in the background. The familiar pull of guilt rose up, strong and painful. Before I could respond, Evelyn Hart stepped forward. Her presence was calm but firm, like an anchor in rough water. "Kairos has given more than most people ever will," she said clearly. "This space isn't for strangers. It's for children who are fighting for their lives, families who have nowhere else to turn. Healing Haven has already brought peace to families who desperately needed it." Doctor Nadia Patel moved beside her, voice steady and professional. "Several of my young patients have used this prototype space. Their parents told me the calm environment helped reduce their children's anxiety before procedures. This isn't selfishness. This is healing." The room remained deathly quiet. My father's jaw tightened. He took one step closer, lowering his voice but not enough to hide the edge. "You owe us for everything you've done in the past. Those studios Selene built, your designs are part of them. You need to make this right. You need to come back and finish what you started." The demand hung heavy in the air. I looked at Orion. He was watching me with wide, uncertain eyes, his small hands clutching the edge of the cushion. Pain surged through me. Deep, old pain, mixed with a strange, quiet sense of release. I had carried their expectations for so long. Now, standing in the space I had built for my son and for children like him, I felt the full weight of what I was choosing. I turned back to my family, my voice low but unshaken. "I don't owe you my future," I said slowly. "I gave what I could, but I will not keep sacrificing my son's peace to keep everyone else comfortable." Selene let out a broken sob. My mother covered her mouth. My father stared at me as if seeing a stranger. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. In that moment, the fracture I had felt weeks ago became something visible to everyone. This was no longer a private wound, it was a public breaking point. And as I stood there, surrounded by the soft light I had designed with love, I realized the storm had finally arrived. I just didn't know yet how much damage it would leave behind. The days after the opening felt strangely quiet. I drove Orion home from Healing Haven that evening with the windows slightly open. The cool Portland air moved gently through the car. He rested his head against the seat, still tired but peaceful. For the first time in a long while, the silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt like breathing room. In the weeks that followed, I stopped rushing. Every afternoon, when the light was soft and golden, I took Orion into our small backyard. We worked on tiny design projects together. Nothing grand, just simple wooden benches, a little reading nook under the old maple tree, and a quiet corner where he could sit and draw without anyone asking him how he felt. Those slow hours of creating side by side became our way of healing. Theo Lang and Jordan Reed never wavered. They showed up early, stayed late, and helped turn the first Healing Haven into the beginning of something bigger. More families began to visit. More children found small pockets of peace within those walls. The work grew naturally, one careful step at a time. Then, slowly, other changes started to appear. Some of Selene's former clients began reaching out to me directly. They had seen the spaces I created and recognized something deeper in them, a kind of calm that went beyond aesthetics. They wanted that same feeling for their own homes and businesses. I accepted only the projects that felt right, never rushing, never overextending. One quiet morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from my parents. Vance and Lyra's handwriting was familiar on the envelope. Inside, the words were careful, filled with careful apologies and mentions of missing us. They spoke of regret and hoped we could find a way back. I read the letter twice, sitting at the kitchen table while Orion ate breakfast nearby. My chest tightened with old pain, but it no longer consumed me. I wrote back a short, honest reply. "I still love you both, but love now means distance for me. I need space to be the father Orion deserves. I hope one day you can understand." I sealed the envelope and let it go. Selene, for her part, moved forward on her own. She found new contractors and designers. There were no more late-night calls asking for my help, no more expectations that I would drop everything. I heard through mutual friends that her third studio eventually opened, smaller than she had planned, but entirely her own. The knowledge brought me neither triumph nor sorrow, only a quiet acceptance. Months passed. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted everything in warm amber light, I sat with Orion at Healing Haven. The main room was empty except for us. He was kneeling on the soft rug, carefully coloring a drawing with crayons. The paper showed a simple house with wide windows and a big tree in the yard. At the bottom, in his shaky handwriting, he had written, "Our safe home." I watched him, my heart full in a way words could never fully capture. In that gentle silence, I understood something profound. Setting boundaries had not been an act of revenge. It had never been about punishment or winning. It was the deepest form of love I could offer, both to my son and to myself. By finally saying no to the endless giving, I had created space for something real and lasting. I reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from Orion's forehead. He looked up and smiled, that small, trusting smile that reminded me why every difficult choice had been worth it. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is protect what matters most, and the most powerful way to protect the people you love is to learn how to say no to those who have grown used to hearing only yes. The light outside slowly faded into evening. I stayed right there, beside my son, in the quiet strength of the walls we had finally learned to build for ourselves. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us. Once again, thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audio-visual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.